Everything starts with this kid named Akimitsu, who meets his father, but his father is about to leave and abandon him. Akimitsu's father tells him that he now wants to be alone, and that he just wants him to be happy and feel very proud of him. Hey, before you judge, did you know that if you don't subscribe to this channel, a little kitten will cry? Please don't let a kitten cry and subscribe to this channel and follow me on my Instagram, since every now and then I post interesting things in my stories. And why not? We can gossip around there. Without anything else to say, let's continue. I mean, his father goes so far as to tell him that his father is great. I think Akimitsu didn't realize what his father was trying to say. But hey, before we start, don't forget that you can support me by subscribing, commenting, giving a piece of a like and sharing this video with all your friends, which would support me a lot and motivate me to keep uploading videos, since this month I'm going to be much more active. Well, what's left of the month, but you know what I mean. By the way, somewhere in this video Pikachu will appear, a fictional character from the Pokemon saga and franchise, so if you find it, let me know down in the comments. Also, I'd like you to answer this question and leave it down in the comments. What would you do if you won $1 million? And by the way, also follow me on my Instagram, where if you send me a little greeting, I'll send you a shout out in the next video. Now, without adding any more filler, let's begin. We see that the years pass and now that Takemitsu is already a grown man, well, a teenager, he just woke up and has to go to class, so he gets up and runs out. We see that he's a hard-working student at school, but he only cares about studying and working, and doesn't care about any kind of activity, like a typical teenager, such as going to karaoke, hanging out with friends, or looking at girls. Especially the last one, since our protagonist, Akimitsu Kagami, says there is no room for women in his life, so Kagami leaves his friends behind and quickly heads home. From the moment he wakes up, he says he's not worried, and he leaves in a very nervous state. Akimitsu represents 80% of this community, in other words, virgins. I include myself. Akimitsu arrives home and tries to sleep by turning off all the lights, but he wakes up quickly, still dreaming about the girl Lin, from before. The next day passes and we see that something has happened to Kagami. It's like he broke down, because before he was a very serious guy who wasn't interested in any kind of group outings or being with girls, but now he's in wild mode and wants to go out without caring about work or classes. And all of this is because he has fallen in love at first sight with that beautiful girl from before, so he tries to forget her by doing this kind of nonsense, but it doesn't work, and we see that Akagami is about to fail the semester, practically losing a year at the institute or university where he is enrolled, and he also got fired from his job for goofing around. Yes, I know what you're thinking. Akagami, the wild one, pretty much ruined his life because of a girl. And Akagami spots a cat in a well, so he goes over to save it, but the idiot falls, and while the cat didn't even need help, it could basically jump and get out on its own. Meanwhile, we see that Suzuki calls the head of the temple, where she tells her that the boy who was supposed to come tomorrow has already arrived, to which the head says it's strange because the boy who was supposed to come tomorrow is already with her. Suzuki doesn't think he's an imposter or a thief, she thinks he's a spirit or a ghost. Suzuki is a little gullible because honestly I'm more scared of living things than dead things. But suddenly Suzuki hears that someone has returned. This girl who appeared is named Tsukuyo. Tsukuyo is a girl who, like Suzuki, lives in the temple, and Suzuki tells Tsukuyo that the boy who appeared today is a ghost or a spirit, to which Tsukuyo tells her not to be silly, that such things don't exist. But suddenly, behind her appears our protagonist, all bloody, all from the fall into the well, and our protagonist is just asking for help because he's bleeding. But she gets scared and thinks he's a tormented spirit, so they both run away. And obviously, since our protagonist is asking for help, he chases them, and Suzuki runs away and leaves her sister behind. What a bad sister, but anyway, Tsukuyo is the one who freezes up and can't do anything and faints. And suddenly two other girls appear, but we haven't been introduced to them yet. So, depending on the name, we see that our protagonist arrives where Suzuki is, and Suzuki gives this supposed ghost a really good beating. We see that our protagonist passes out, and when he wakes up, he realizes that the head of the temple has already arrived. Our poor protagonist got confused and ended up at a temple that is only for women. And Suzuki, by the coincidence of life, was waiting for a little monk, so she thought he was the monk she had been expecting. the head of the temple tells our protagonist that since they got confused and gave him a really good beating, the head proposes that he become the monk of the temple. To which some girl disagrees with this decision. By the way, the head of the temple is named Kiki. The other members of the temple also disagree with Kiki's decision. All of this because that temple is only for women and men are not allowed. To which Kiki says that's an illusion they're too easily carried away by, and she removes the sign that says no men allowed. And here there is a division of opinions among the girls. Some do want him there, as a source of cheap, practically free, male labor, while others wouldn't feel very safe with that man there. All of this because of the bad impression our protagonist gave those girls. In other words, the girls have the impression that he is a pervert and a horn dog. But that's far from reality, or well, half yes and half no, because yes, our protagonist is a horn dog. But he would never dare do anything bad. We see that our protagonist rejects the idea of staying at the temple since he doesn't want to cause more problems for this group of girls. But when he refuses, Kiki tells him not to worry, that she will fix everything. Here we find out that Suzuki does remember our protagonist from the first time they met, when our protagonist acted awkward and weird so they would kick him out. And the one in charge of seducing our protagonist is Tsukuyo, since she apparently has the best body of all. Well, Kiki beats her, but Kiki is a grown woman. So we see the day passes and we see that our protagonist is a very hard-working man, since he gets up at 5 in the morning and does everything that needs to be done around the house. We see him cleaning the whole house and cooking food for the girls, showing us that our protagonist is a very hard-working and honorable person. He thinks he is becoming again the honorable man without impure thoughts, but then Tsukuyo appears, and she shows up in her pajamas and apparently doesn't realize she's somewhat exposed. But well, we see that our protagonist gets excited and has impure thoughts. We then see Tsukuyo appear, with full intention of throwing our protagonist out on the street, so she tries to seduce him. But first she insults the food our protagonist cooked, only to realize that his cooking is incredibly delicious. So we see how Tsukuyo starts demanding all kinds of things from our protagonist with the goal of tiring him out, so he leaves, while also trying to distract him with her sensuality. But nothing works on our protagonist. We see that our protagonist goes into the shower, and when he's about to come out, he finds his sister-in-law waiting outside the shower, all with the goal that Suzuki would see them when he came out of the shower, to which she says it's a perfect plan and it can't fail. And that's exactly what happens. When our protagonist comes out, he slips and falls on top of his sister-in-law, just as Suzuki appears. We see that our protagonist is surprised, but Suzuki is even more surprised. Suzuki tells our protagonist to please leave, to which our protagonist simply obeys and leaves. We see that Tsukuyo meets with her other sisters, where they congratulate her for having gotten rid of the boy. But Tsukuyo goes to Suzuki, and Suzuki simply ignores her. Tsukuyo goes to Suzuki and asks why she's ignoring her, to which Suzuki says she can't look Tsukuyo in the face, because every time she sees Tsukuyo's face she imagines Kagami, our protagonist, completely naked, just as God brought him into this world. And we see that they make peace. By the way, Suzuki knew about Tsukuyo's plan from the start, in other words, the plan to seduce our protagonist so he would leave, so she takes the idea very much into account. They start talking very calmly, showing that Suzuki has a certain kind of fondness for our protagonist, and Tsukuyo accepts it. So they think about going to tell our protagonist about the misunderstanding that happened in the bathroom, but Kiki appears and tells them that our protagonist left the monastery a while ago. Going back to our protagonist, he finds himself at a police station where he wants to turn himself in. And you might ask, what did this guy do? Well, nothing exactly. What happened is that when Tsukuyo went to the bathroom and our protagonist fell on top of her because he slipped, he accidentally stole a kiss from her. And he thinks this is a crime, to which the officer tells him he's an idiot and ignores him. Our protagonist goes to his old house, only to find that the landlord has already sold all his things, so he had to sleep on the street in a cardboard box, and they say desperate times call for desperate measures, and well, our protagonist is desperate, so he thinks about selling his organs. But suddenly Suzuki appears and tells our protagonist to please come back to the house and stop being an idiot. Our protagonist at first doesn't want to, but she ends up convincing him. By the way, Tsukuyo also appears and gives our protagonist a little piece of paper, with a 5,000 yen fee, and that's because our protagonist stole her first kiss, so she wants him to pay for it. We see those three return to the house, well, more precisely the temple, where our protagonist apologizes and says he'll make an effort again to do all the household chores. We see that Kureha helps our protagonist cook, and by the way, Kureha is the little sister of this family. They start talking, but suddenly our protagonist thinks about Suzuki bathing, so he has impure thoughts about Suzuki, but the idiot doesn't realize he's thinking out loud, so Kureha hears him. But instead of being scared by the very impure thoughts our protagonist has, Kureha tries to help him. So Kagami, our protagonist, unknowingly walks into the bathroom where Tsukuyo and Suzuki were. By the way, Kureha was just messing with our protagonist and was only joking. But since she has a poker face, meaning she shows no kind of emotion, it's impossible to tell if she's serious or joking. So we see everything passes and everyone is happy and content, well, some more than others, because for our protagonist the problems aren't over yet. Yes, our protagonist is liked by Suzuki, Tsukuyo, and Kureha, but there are still girls who aren't convinced that our protagonist should be there, and they will do everything possible to get him to leave the temple. By the way, the new girl who is going to challenge our protagonist is named Mia, and Mia challenges our protagonist to a duel, since she considers that Suzuki and Tsukuyo, well, lost against our protagonist. Not at all, but she's living in her own movie. But by the way, Mia won't be competing with our protagonist to make him stay or leave, because she says he can stay, fine. The problem is that he's a man. So it goes like this: if our protagonist loses, Mia castrates him. Okay then. Pretty chill threat. But our protagonist, instead of getting all nervous and scared, actually kind of likes the idea. Why, you might ask? Very simple, our protagonist is someone who doesn't want to have impure thoughts and thinks castration is a very reasonable option. No, it's not. Practically they're both being extreme. By the way, afternoon arrives and Suzuki, Tsukuyo, and Kureha have a commitment to perform a ritual at the temple, so Suzuki tells our protagonist to please try to get along well with Mia. Suzuki, I'm not the smartest, but I don't think it's very smart to leave the girl who wants to castrate our protagonist alone with him. And by the way, you're also taking away the only two people who can stop Mia, which are Tsukuyo and Kureha. And 5 minutes after those girls have left, Mia appears along with another girl named Kagura, where Kagura says she's Mia's older sister, but that's nonsense because Mia isn't her sister, and on top of that Mia is older than her. Mia says let's get started and the duel challenge, whatever you want to call it, begins. And you might ask, what does the challenge consist of? Well, the challenge is nothing more and nothing less than a sword fight, which our protagonist goes all wow since he wasn't expecting something like that, because literally Mia is very serious in the sense that she's going to kill him. But then our protagonist wins, and you'll ask, how did he win? Well, I can't tell you or explain because YouTube would demonetize me, because this anime definitely has some very, very dirty things. Since Mia lost, we see that our protagonist can ask anything of Mia as a penalty, but since our protagonist doesn't know exactly what he wants, Kagura pulls out a book full of punishments, so our protagonist wants her to hand over that book because he wants to look at it. But the silly Mia thinks he wants something else, that he wants to grope her or something like that. So we see her run away. But night comes, our protagonist is resting very peacefully in his bed, until Mia climbs on top of him and tells him she's come to fulfill her part of the deal. In other words, she's going to let him do whatever he wants, but our protagonist tells her not to be an idiot, that her purity is unique and she shouldn't give it away to just anyone, and that Kagura got it wrong. He didn't want to touch her, he just wanted the book. So Mia is completely embarrassed and gets very nervous, and she runs out of that room as fast as possible, saying she's a failure as a girl. She locks herself in a room in the temple, but we see that our protagonist was also in that same room. We see the two of them inside, and Kagura then closes the door from outside, trapping them both inside that room. We see that our protagonist does everything possible to change the atmosphere and make it less tense, because Mia doesn't even want to look him in the eyes. But she starts sneezing, so our protagonist does everything he can to wrap her in a blanket. We see them get a little closer and start sharing about their lives, where they realize they have much more in common than expected, since Mia's mother taught Mia that she should always be surrounded by men because she comes from a very high-status family, and that women of high status must have many lovers, which our protagonist feels very identified, since his father practically told him the same thing in different words, that a man should be with many women. So they feel very identified with each other, and they start getting along a little better. And we make peace here. The day passes and they're playing a very cheeky little game, practically playing what I don't know what it's called in your country, Twister, which is a game where there are colors, body parts, and you have to get your body tangled up with the other person and do strange things, which Suzuki sees this and gets very angry. We see everyone gathered at the dining room where they're all eating, and suddenly Kiki announces that today is not the day when Suzuki was supposed to meet her future husband, and that this depends on the future of the temple, because if there is no head monk in this temple, the temple closes. So Suzuki is looking for a husband to make him the head monk, and so Suzuki and our protagonist run off to the appointment, which is very far from the place, and our protagonist tells her not to worry, that they'll definitely make it. So we see how our protagonist together with Suzuki do everything possible to arrive on time to Suzuki's appointment. We see that Suzuki enters the temple to meet her future husband, while our protagonist waits in the vehicle they came in together. We see that our protagonist is very sad because Suzuki is going off with another guy. But suddenly a supervisor from the temple appears, and this girl confuses our protagonist with a monk from that same temple, and being with Suzuki, he meets her future husband named Kiyo, who is the third son of the temple. We see Kiyo and Suzuki talking while our protagonist watches their conversation from a distance. But suddenly Kiyo calls our protagonist and has him sit next to him. Our protagonist starts having very impure and devilish thoughts about Suzuki, so he faints and has to leave. Suzuki tells Kiyo that she's not ready to get married yet and that she doesn't want to get married. But here's the situation, what she doesn't want is to actually get married, she just wants to be formally engaged. She just wants to buy time to become the head of the temple. And with the help of our protagonist, she manages to get Kiyo to accept this proposal. In other words, they're not going to get married, they're not going to do anything indecent. But officially, they'll use Kiyo's name as head of the temple. We see Kiyo leave, and he has to enter a room where he meets a strange woman who earlier found our protagonist in the vehicle. This woman is named Aoa, and she is the high priestess of that temple, and she apparently knows our protagonist's father. And as you may know, that's not good at all. We see our protagonist walking back to his temple alongside Suzuki, but they have to walk since it's very late and there are no buses. So we see they'll have to sleep at a hotel in the area. But we see this is not good at all for our protagonist, since he does everything possible to contain himself and not do anything indecent with his beloved. Well, we skip the day since this video is getting too risky and I don't want to get banned. We see our protagonist arrive home along with Suzuki, and the first person to receive them is Tsukuyo. We see that they quickly leave since they have to go to school. So we see Tsukuyo and Suzuki on their way to school, where Tsukuyo is surprised by the big difference in attitude that Suzuki has had since our protagonist's arrival. We see Tsukuyo arrive at her classroom where she meets her friends. Here, the friends apparently found out about Akagami, our protagonist, and they confuse Akagami with Tsukuyo's boyfriend. Obviously Tsukuyo does everything possible to tell them no, that he's not her boyfriend and she doesn't have a boyfriend. But obviously her friends don't believe her. We see that Tsukuyo approaches the window and spots our protagonist outside her school, all because apparently she forgot her lunch and our protagonist, being the good-hearted person he is, came to bring it to her, but this makes her very nervous, so she runs out to see him, as she doesn't want anyone to find out that he lives at the temple. We see them hide in the nurse's office. But suddenly Tsukuyo's friends appear, so our protagonist has to hide. But he hides in a very compromising place. We see Tsukuyo do everything possible to get her friends to leave. And that's what happens, the girls leave. Our protagonist comes out of his hiding place and sits on the bed, while Tsukuyo kind of falls on top of him, creating another very compromising scene. But now her friends suddenly come back again and see them in that situation. By the way, here we find out that Tsukuyo is in the archery club, but she only joined because Suzuki was in that same club. But then Suzuki left the club because she had to take charge of the temple, leaving Tsukuyo alone in the archery club. We see that now our protagonist wants to talk to Tsukuyo alone in her room, where he tells her that she can do archery again, since he'll take care of all the temple responsibilities. But we see that Tsukuyo tells him it was a lie, she simply doesn't want to do archery, she's bored of it. So we see Tsukuyo leave the house and go to the archery club, but our protagonist follows her. There they meet. We see Tsukuyo tell our protagonist that she's not good at archery at all. The one who is good is her sister, Suzuki. But our protagonist tells her not to talk nonsense, and he grabs her hand and takes her to the temple, where we see Suzuki practicing archery, and we see she's terrible, terribly bad, but she still keeps giving it her all in the things she likes. There, Tsukuyo realizes that her sister didn't leave the club to do temple things, but simply because she's stupidly bad at it, making Tsukuyo happy, since she realizes she can now do what she loves most. Tsukuyo loves archery. So we see Tsukuyo thank our protagonist for helping her, while our protagonist tells her that of course he was going to help her, since all he wants is to see her happy. I mean, obviously Tsukuyo turns completely red from all the words our protagonist says to her. We see the day pass and we see Tsukuyo intentionally forgets her lunch, all with the goal of having our protagonist come see her again. We see our protagonist bring her the food, and Tsukuyo's friends start teasing her that he's her boyfriend, but now she says no, he's not her boyfriend, he's simply part of the family. Obviously that leaves those girls confused. The day passes and we find ourselves in Korea's room, where she's writing in her diary, and we find out that Korea is very happy that our protagonist is in her house. Since our protagonist arrived, Korea's life and the life of the whole temple has been more exciting lately. So our protagonist calls Korea to eat. We go to Suzuki, who is taking a bath, but suddenly she goes to weigh herself and we see that Suzuki is very surprised. She calls a meeting with all the girls and says the scale is cursed, since it's showing a higher number than what she actually weighs. In other words, she's making excuses because she's a bit heavier than normal. And all of this is because of the rich and delicious food our protagonist makes, causing all the girls to overeat. So all the girls agree to exercise and lose weight. But the exercise doesn't work for them since they get tired too quickly, and on top of that they give up right away. So they switch to a better plan and decide to go on a diet. Many of these girls are not happy with that plan, since they don't like dieting, but they have no choice. But first they have to inform our protagonist, since he's the one who prepares the food, so he has to prepare diet food. To which Tsukuyo is a bit embarrassed because she doesn't want our protagonist to find out she's dieting. So the other girls start teasing her, saying that Tsukuyo should marry our protagonist so he'll have to stay in the temple forever. Korea really loves Kagami. But we see that our protagonist suddenly appears carrying a tray full of sweets, making all the girls go crazy because obviously those sweets are delicious but they don't want to eat them. We see that dinner time arrives and everyone is all set to eat. Our protagonist brings the food and is very proud, wanting Suzuki to be very happy eating his cooking. But when Suzuki eats our protagonist's food, she shows no reaction whatsoever. So our protagonist gets discouraged and thinks she doesn't like his food. So she's thinking the worst, that she's going to get fired, that they're going to cut off her head, things like that, normal things that usually happen to people. But soon we find out the truth. Suzuki is training to become the head leader of the temple, and for that she has to meet certain requirements, and one of the requirements is that when she eats, she must not make any kind of sound, faces, or talk while eating. That kind of thing. We see our protagonist wants to help Suzuki, so he offers to help her with exercises and train with her. But he's not the only one. Mia was also listening behind the door and offers to train with them too, so as to become monks. And here comes an interesting fact. Our protagonist thought that since he arrived at the temple he was already a monk, so he had been holding back around the women. But then he finds out he's not actually a monk. So our protagonist falls into some very terrible worldly desires. But he tries to control himself and holds it together. We see them outside the temple, and suddenly Suzuki's fiancé appears. We quickly realize that Suzuki's fiancé and Kiki don't exactly get along well, more on Kiki's side, as she apparently hates this man. and quickly this man says that if Suzuki doesn't become a nun within 3 months, their engagement is called off. And you know how this goes, if the engagement is called off, the temple goes under. So we see the day pass, and Mia, Suzuki, and our protagonist are ready to undergo the training to become monks. Easier said than done, since this involves rigorous training. Although it's much more rigorous than you might think, and it seems this training is more focused on our protagonist, because for some strange reason Kiki makes everyone do it in their underwear. And so we see everyone start training, and our protagonist tries to hold himself back from getting distracted by all the sensuality that Suzuki and Mia radiate. After all that, night comes and these three will have to sleep together in one room. The day passes and we see these three barely slept at all. So we see them spend an entire day practicing methods to become true monks. We see another day pass, and it's Christmas Eve, so Kagami hates this date because his parents always split up around this time, which is why he hates this kind of date. But we see Suzuki tells him to go out on Christmas Eve, practically they're going to have a Christmas date. We see them in a store where they see some things they like, and a girl named Mari appears who seems to be a friend of Suzuki's, where Mari quickly confuses our protagonist and Suzuki as a couple, making them very nervous and turning them both completely red, especially Suzuki. Then we see the temple where the girls are talking, and they realize that our protagonist has changed this family a lot. Before they were different kinds of people, but they no longer miss their previous selves, and instead they're very lively and apparently very fond of our protagonist. All except Kagura, since Kagura says she's going to destroy our protagonist. We see the day pass, and now Christmas arrives, where Kagami outdoes himself and brings very delicious food, even brought meat, making all the girls extremely excited, and Kureha even tells him to marry her. We see the moment of gift-giving arrives, and apparently this temple has the tradition of placing gifts randomly. In other words, whoever gets a gift, keeps it. Since our protagonist and Mia don't have gifts, they make 2 coupons that say redeemable for anything, where the person who gets their coupon can ask anything of our protagonist or Mia. But we see that these coupons end up going to themselves, so they exchange them with each other. We then see that Kagura trades her gift for our protagonist's coupon, so Kagura can now ask our protagonist for any kind of crazy thing and he has to obey no matter what. Meanwhile, Kagura gives everyone invitations to a hot spring. Night comes and Suzuki finds herself alone with our protagonist, where we see our protagonist actually does have a gift for her. He pulls out some bracelets, but they're couples bracelets. This makes the two of them go quiet. We now see the whole family, or rather, the whole temple, going to the hot springs that Kagura invited them to, but here we see very strange things happening, and it seems Kagura is planning something to get rid of our protagonist. Since apparently she wants our protagonist to leave the temple, as she doesn't want him there. She wants to turn Mia into a perfect. I don't know how to say it without getting demonetized, but let's just say Kagura wants Mia to do very dirty things with many men. How awful. We see the day pass, and we see them preparing mochi in a very provocative way, but obviously I can't show these scenes because YouTube would get mad at me. So let's move through this chapter as fast as possible because if not, and I'm not even monetized. We see the day pass and everyone is at a shrine together. She's going to pay off his entire debt, but our protagonist obviously refuses and obviously isn't going anywhere. All of this because Kagura is a servant of Mia's family, and you already know what Mia's family is like, a bunch of gluttons. So Kagura doesn't want Mia to fall in love with our protagonist and thinks it's better to kick him out before they fall in love. But our protagonist obviously rejects this and stands his ground. But everything changes when our protagonist mentions Mia's name, because here's the thing, our protagonist is obviously in love with Suzuki, but Mia is in love with our protagonist. And here's the situation, in that Kagura wants to get rid of our protagonist not because she wants Mia to be a harlot, but because she doesn't want her to fall in love with him, knowing that our protagonist would end up breaking Mia's heart. So Kagura gets angry with our protagonist and kicks him where it hurts. The day passes and we see our protagonist has developed a small trauma around Kagura's name. Yes, he's scared of Kagura, and Mia notices this, so she takes our protagonist to Kagura, and Mia does everything possible to get these two to make peace, and Mia's best plan for them to reconcile is practically locking them in a room together until they sort out their problems. But this doesn't work and quickly makes Kagura leave the place. But Kagura does have a plan. Her next move is this: since our protagonist has feelings for Suzuki, what she plans to do is break Suzuki's heart so that our protagonist and Mia end up together forever. And everyone lives happily ever after. We go to the temple where we find Tsukuyo, who is dreaming about our protagonist. Give me a kiss, but she's discovered by Koreha, so Tsukuyo tells Koreha not to say anything to anyone, please. We see Tsukuyo go to the kitchen, but our protagonist is also there. There, Tsukuyo notices that Mia and our protagonist get along way too well, so she gets a bit jealous. We see Tsukuyo go with Mia and Kagura to some room for an interrogation of sorts with Mia. The first question Tsukuyo asks Mia is whether Mia has feelings for our protagonist, to which Mia responds no, that she doesn't like our protagonist and only sees him as a companion. But her words say something else, because at the end she says she just wants our protagonist to be by her side for the rest of her life, making Tsukuyo very angry. Though more than angry, she's completely jealous. We see our protagonist suddenly appear, but nothing happens because things get cleared up and now all is fine. But our protagonist is preparing food and suddenly lets out a scream fit for a lady because they ran out of rice, so Mia comes over and asks what happened. Our protagonist tells her they ran out of rice, to which Mia, being a bit of an airhead, says oh well, let's just go buy more. But the situation is that the temple's finances are a complete mess since they don't have a single cent to buy anything. But then Suzuki also appears and says they should get ready, as they're going to ask for rice from the neighboring houses. They quickly arrive at the house of a woman with two very cheeky kids, and this woman apparently is the person who always gives food to Suzuki. So we see how these two girls along with our protagonist return to the temple. The day passes and we see them continue training to become monks. But here comes the small problem this temple has. The temple needs to repair a statue that was broken, because if it remains broken, they won't be able to hold the ceremony for people to become monks. But unfortunately for them, the repair of this statue costs way too much. It literally costs 500,000 yen. So Kiki, the head of the temple, is very worried. But Suzuki says not to worry, that she will get the 500,000 yen. To which our protagonist says it's not that easy to get 500,000 yen since it's a lot of money. But Suzuki says she has faith and knows everything will work out. We go to our protagonist in his room, alone, looking for a job to help Suzuki get the money, but suddenly Suzuki arrives again, this time dressed as a maid. To which our protagonist wonders what on earth is going on, but even more than that, he has very impure thoughts and starts getting a nosebleed. We see Suzuki tell our protagonist that she's going to work at 5 or 6 restaurants as a maid to get the 500,000 yen, to which our protagonist says that's impossible. But we see Suzuki is a very optimistic person. We see Suzuki lie down on our protagonist's bed, and he starts giving her a massage since she is very stressed, from all the exercise and all the training to become a nun. But Suzuki makes some very strange sounds, so Tsukuyo, her sister, hears her from outside the room and turns completely red, thinking they're doing some devilish dirty stuff. So Tsukuyo quickly enters our protagonist's room, but this time sees that our protagonist was only giving Suzuki a massage. We see our protagonist tell Suzuki not to worry and that he'll take care of it, to which Suzuki tells him not to get involved, that it's none of his business. So our protagonist says fine, it's none of my business, and quickly leaves, but not before telling Tsukuyo that tomorrow he has a date with her. We see the day pass and Tsukuyo got all dressed up in the nicest way she could find, since she does want to have that date with our protagonist. Then suddenly our protagonist appears, and being the man he is, he shows up without getting dressed up or prepared, ultra casual, making Tsukuyo a bit disappointed. But quickly our protagonist plays things in his favor by telling her she looks very beautiful. So we see those two leave the temple and go on their little date. We see our protagonist wants to buy a new cell phone, but he doesn't have much money, so he can't get a good plan. But then he finds a flyer that says a couple's plan costs only 980 yen per month, something that works great for him since it's very cheap. The small situation is that he needs to have a partner but he doesn't have anyone, so they're going to pretend with Tsukuyo that they're a couple to get the new phone. We see our protagonist with Tsukuyo at the store to buy the new phone, where Tsukuyo turns completely red since she wasn't expecting to be put in that situation and pretend to be our protagonist's girlfriend. So we see how our protagonist gets his phone and is the happiest person alive. We see Tsukuyo asks for his number and they exchange phone numbers, making them both very happy. We find ourselves with Suzuki, who is very worried about what she told our protagonist, that he shouldn't get involved, that she'll handle it. So she's worried because she sees our protagonist looking kind of sad. Suzuki goes to see our protagonist, but sees that he's very close to her neck area. So she gets very nervous and a little jealous and runs away. We see our protagonist, who has planned to make peace with Suzuki. And when he finds Suzuki, he tries to make peace. But Suzuki acts as if nothing happened. Suddenly Kiki appears and tells Suzuki to go do something in the storage room, while Kiki stays behind with our protagonist, where Kiki asks our protagonist if something happened between him and Suzuki, to which our protagonist says nothing, they just had a fight. To which Kiki says it's normal for lovebirds to fight. To which our protagonist says they're not lovebirds. To which Kiki suddenly asks our protagonist how he sees Suzuki, to which our protagonist, a bit surprised, says that Suzuki is someone he can trust. But quickly Kiki and our protagonist are interrupted by Koreha, who tells Kiki that there's a group of people who came to see her. This group of people apparently wants to leave the temple, to which Kiki, all excited, runs off to see this group of people, since apparently those who leave the temple have to pay money as an offering, since they were part of the community. Obviously Kiki and this temple have no money, so she's happy this group is leaving just for the money. Runs off to see this group of people, since apparently those who leave the temple have to pay money as an offering, since they were part of the community. Obviously Kiki and this temple have no money, so she's happy this group is leaving just for the money, but just when they meet the family, we see that the family leaves and Suzuki was present. Apparently Suzuki is a bit naive and didn't know they had to pay a fee, so this family didn't have to pay anything and left for free. This is because Suzuki is the nicest person in the world and doesn't want to charge people who are leaving because it's very bad manners. We see the next day comes, Suzuki wakes up with all the energy in the world to keep working and finally get some money. But our protagonist isn't at home because apparently he went out with Kiki, but Tsukuyo sends him messages since she's the only one who has his phone number. Which makes the other girls jealous. We find ourselves with our protagonist, who is begging Kiki to let Suzuki train with them again, but Kiki says absolutely not, since Suzuki has to resolve her own problems first before training. But we see Kiki quickly gets up from her seat and leaves. We see Tsukuyo calls our protagonist and tells him that Suzuki has disappeared, so obviously our protagonist runs out into the street without thinking, even though it's raining, to go look for Suzuki. By the way, I know she is in a very bad place, since she's comparing herself to her mother. Her mother was a very strong person, a very hard-working person who always had a solution for everything, something she feels she doesn't have. At that moment she feels very useless. So she finds herself very sad, sitting under a bridge, the very same bridge in the same box where our protagonist was when he was very sad and had nowhere to go. Where Suzuki saved our protagonist, but now it's our protagonist's turn to save Suzuki. So our protagonist finds Suzuki, and the first thing he does is give her a strong hug, as if to say, "Don't worry, I'm here now." We see the day pass and Suzuki has a very high fever from being out in the rain all night, so she can't get out of bed. But we see that our protagonist Akagami stayed by her side all night, taking care of her while she slept in her bed. We see our protagonist with Suzuki start talking, but they're suddenly interrupted by all the girls from the temple, who quickly open the door and start scolding Suzuki since they were all very worried about their sister. And you know what, guys, they're not blood sisters, or well, not most of them, but they're practically a family. While all these girls gather, they start talking, showing they are genuine because we see Suzuki goes to Kiki and tells her that she will definitely become the head nun of the family in the temple. We see all the girls agree to work together because they all love the temple, and on top of that they want to always be together. And that's how this anime ends. By the way, if you like this video, don't forget you can support me by subscribing, commenting, giving a piece of a like and sharing this video with all your friends. Also don't forget you can follow me on my Instagram where every now and then I post very interesting stories. Without anything else to say, see you next time. I love you all.